You'll let me know when you're ready. Good morning, how are you?
How are you?
Really well. Been at Hawthorne seeing the ferry terminal there. It's incredible. Everyone good? Excellent. Well, the Premier's on her way to Gympie and she'll provide a more detailed disaster update later today, perhaps around midday, but I'm happy to give a brief update and take questions. It's clear that the flooding disaster emergency here in the southeast is not over yet, but the recovery process has begun. Last night, the Brisbane River peaked at 2.49 metres. That's lower than the projected peak of 2.6 metres and is well within the moderate flood level range, less than the major flood level range that we hit earlier in the week. There are still 30,000 homes without power, mostly in the Brisbane, Ipswich and Logan areas, but of course ranging all the way from Gympie to the border. Reports are that the flood experience in Logan was at least as bad as has been experienced since 1974. The Mayor reported that they are already aware of less than 100 homes that have been inundated. They were anticipating up to 200 homes being anticipated, but those assessments will continue throughout the day. They have people currently in the field assessing those throughout the day. The Bureau is warning of more storms coming, and while they will be more localised than the weather that we experienced at the weekend, they could still be dangerous and could still result in localised and or flash flooding. And so we were monitoring that situation very closely. QFES, supported by local government and the QRA, began doing damage assessments yesterday. They were more able to get into areas where the damage was largely on Sunday, so those affected by localised flooding and creek flooding, but we will get more assessments today and we'll have a better picture today of what level of damage we have experienced. So the cleanup begins now, but especially with those storms coming, it's absolutely important that people stay safe. I want to thank all of the workers and all of the volunteers, whether they're from the SES, the police, our fire and emergency services, our energy workers are doing just such an incredible job. Everyone employed in local government who are staffing our local LDMGs and everyone doing those disaster assessments, they're doing an incredible job. We're coming to you today from Suncorp Stadium, and we're also joined by the naming rights sponsors of the stadium, Suncorp. Of course, Suncorp is one of our biggest insurers. Both the stadium and Suncorp are well experienced at dealing with floods and other disasters, and as you can see, the stadium is already mopping up. Early estimates suggest that the damage bill for this disaster could be up to $1 billion, but Suncorp will have a clearer idea and be able to report to you how many claims they've received so far and what the process is going from here. So I'll hand over to them.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. I'm Steve Johnson, the CEO of Suncorp, and it's good to be out here at Suncorp Stadium, and particularly good to be able to see that all on track for the season opener. Much to the disappointment, I'm sure, of the Rabbitohs, it is a very resilient stadium, just as Queenslanders are resilient. I'll give you some claims numbers. Overnight, we've seen the claims numbers from a Suncorp perspective top over 13,000. That's an extraordinary number of claims in a very short period of time. So again, we just make that plea to our customers and all customers in the insurance industry, for that matter, to be able to get online, get those claims lodged digitally. That most insurers now have the ability to lodge claims digitally, and it speeds up the process. It means we can get assessors in quicker. It means we can talk to the customers about what they need to do. Just in terms of the key hotspots for us over the last couple of days, Deagon, Boondall, Everton Park and Caboolture, and of course we have the unfolding situation in northern New South Wales, particularly in Lismore, where we've seen that community flood almost 3 times in the last 5 years, and it's a very significant event down in northern New South Wales. The key thing for us will be to get assessors on the ground, and we're doing that in the next 24 hours, starting in Gympie, and then we'll work our way down the coast. We'll get assessors in, that'll give us a good sense of the extent of the damage. As we see it today, it's a very different event to 2011. Yes, we're going to have a lot of large losses. That's water that's come in through the property, come in through the bottom level, in some levels, in some cases fully taken over the whole house. But there's also a lot of flash flooding, a lot of damage from roofs that's come through that extraordinary weather that we've seen. So it'll be a very, very challenging event for us to work our way through. But just be comforted that we have got we're a national company. We've got resources that we can deploy from both all around Australia, and we're also bringing some people in from New Zealand to support the recovery effort. I think the inevitability here is that we are going to be repairing homes that we repaired 3 or 4 times. And that's what we saw in 2011. Some of those houses we're already seeing that claims have been lodged, we'll be repairing them again. And so what this really brings to bear is the need to build it back better. We need to take account of the water that we've seen, where that water has flowed, and work with our customers and work with the industry more broadly to build homes that are more resilient. You've seen Suncorp talk about the One House initiative, about the support that we provide through that Build It Back Better package, where we will step in and help customers lift building equipment off the ground and elevate their houses so that we can not stand in the face of this event. It's a very big psychological event for customers. It takes them a long time to recover, and we need to really galvanise around building infrastructure, public and private, that's more resilient for these sorts of events. So I might pause there and hand over to Jonty Bush, the member for Cooper.
Thank you, and good morning everyone. My name's Jonty Bush. I am the member for Cooper. We are standing here this morning on Yugara and Turrbal land, but we're also standing here this morning on the land of Suncorp Stadium, which has been the birthplace and the home for so many of our sporting and cultural icons. Unfortunately, Suncorp was also one of the areas in our electorate that was hit by the Queensland floods, as were areas of Milton, Rosalie, Paddington, out the back of Ashgrove and the Gab. I'd like to start by acknowledging, the really hard work of Queensland Fire and Emergency Services and Queensland Police, who have just done an extraordinary job in getting clean-up action and recovery efforts happening in our local area. I'd like to acknowledge Dave Donaghy and the team at the Broncos. They were one of the first phone calls I received, actually was from the Broncos, asking, how can we get involved and how can we clean up and how can we assist? And I know they've been helping not just here locally, but right throughout the state where we've had damage and floods. So I'd like to call them out and say thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge all of our wonderful members of the public and business owners who have come forward and really lent assistance during this time. I was in Ashgrove yesterday speaking to homes that were hit, and the stories coming out around resilience and recovery, people searching for neighbours, wedding rings that had been lost in a foot of mud and recovering those, and precious heirlooms and photos. Neighbours helping to wash neighbours' clothes and return them and delivering meals. I think there's a lot of stories that will be told about these floods, but when the mud all washes away, the main story that will last will be one of resilience and recovery and hope. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonty. Once again, Queensland communities have been asked to recover from a major natural disaster. We've seen this natural disaster impact communities from Maryborough all the way through to the Gold Coast and west to Toowoomba. Our focus at this particular point in time as we commence the clean-up and transition into recovery is about getting people back in their homes. It's about getting small business and medium enterprise businesses back and operating, and it's about reconnecting communities. We've already seen on the media large examples of massive disruption to our infrastructure network, and that will be a key focus over the coming months. This will be a big task for Queenslanders, but we have done this before. The community, local government and state government and the Commonwealth government will come together to support the recovery of our communities, just as we've been done before. With this in mind, 18 councils in this impacted area have already been activated for a range of relief measures, and at this stage also 11 council areas have been activated for individual hardship assistance for their communities directly impacted by this event. We recognise, though, that waters are still receding in many areas, and as information on the impacts to those communities become available, we will also continue to extend those relief measures to those communities. So the focus now is very much on the planning and delivery phase. I would repeat that this is going to be a massive job, but we are all working together in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Mike Washing, Queensland Fire Emergency Services. Our current focus is a combination of the transition to relief and recovery efforts. So we have an enormous number of our rural fire volunteers, state emergency service volunteers and our fire rescue staff currently in clean-up operations, ranging from Maryborough. They've started in Maryborough today. They've been very active in the recent days in Gympie, right through to the Gold Coast once the floodwaters are starting to recede. We've still got a number of taskings. We've now had over 10,200 requests for assistance to the SES, and they continue to come in. A range of things in terms of resupply issues, where we've still got isolated communities for medicine, for food supplies, as well as to helping people get out of some of those isolated communities. Overnight, we've still had 3 swift water rescues or water rescues, so some of those are still coming through. And we've got a watchful eye on the weather events that are coming through, as we heard from the Deputy Premier, that we've got that traditional afternoon storm activity this afternoon right through to the weekend that we're very conscious of for the existing flood impacted areas, but also for any new areas that may be impacted by those potential storms, the winds associated with those storms and any flash flooding. I'd also like to take this opportunity to say an enormous thank you to all of our volunteers and staff throughout Queensland. We've got volunteers and staff that have come from far north Queensland that are well versed with severe weather events and flood events. They're down here in southeast Queensland helping out, and we're very conscious also of the impact in New South Wales, and we're in close collaboration and communication with our New South Wales colleagues who are also experiencing significant floods, as we're seeing at the moment, and will continue to do so. And so this huge partnership, if you will, of friends helping friends, services helping services, all working with the community in terms of this efforts in moving into the relief and recovery efforts, which will be so very important for the local communities themselves. Thank you.
We're all happy to take questions.
Minister, do you have a plea to insurance companies about how they should process use of the Queenslanders?
Yeah, look, obviously we'd urge insurers to move as quickly as they possibly can to support their customers, both in the immediate aftermath with accommodation and clean-up, but also to get them back on their feet as quickly as they can. And I'm sure they will. We're in constant contact with insurers like Suncorp, as well as through the Insurance Council. I met with a lot of people yesterday who had lost everything, and many of them were uninsured. Many of those that were insured said things like, we're lucky we're insured, we're lucky we're with Suncorp. And I think that goes to just how experienced Suncorp is at dealing with Queensland-style disasters, and no doubt they'll be moving very, very quickly, as will all the other insurers, to support people throughout the day.
For a lot of people after 2011, flood insurance became unaffordable because premiums rose so high. There will be a lot of Queenslanders who are either uninsured or underinsured in this disaster, and how can we help them?
As I said yesterday, I met with lots of people yesterday as I said earlier, I met with lots of people yesterday who had lost everything again and were unable to get insured after 2011, and it's just heartbreaking to hear those stories. We do have programs to support them. The immediate hardship payments are being activated right now. Give It has their programs up and running, so that if people want to help those who've lost everything in the floods, they should go to Give It, and people there are registered for new washing machines and dryers and fridges and baby clothes and all sorts of things. So we will be there to support them. But you're right; those who were unable to get insurance after 2011, they're having a really tough time right now.
you expect the Mud Army to be out in force today, and how much do you think that will help those people who've been affected? How many people do you think will be joining in and picking up a shovel or whatever?
Oh, look, the last update I saw, there were more than 5,000 people registered to help, which is just fantastic. A lot of the worst affected areas, it's too soon to clean up. Where I was yesterday in Logan, it was just peaking. Goodna was still largely underwater, and so we need to let those waters recede and each tidal peak recede before we can get in and clean up properly. Those locations that were affected by more localised flash or creek-based flooding from Sunday, that's where we were able to start from yesterday and get in there now. But I understand that coming into the weekend is when the peak of that cleanup activity will be able to occur, particularly in Brisbane, Logan and Ipswich. That's why we're concerned about these weather forecasts starting late today, perhaps around midnight here in Brisbane, and continuing right through till Sunday. And that could affect both the ability to do the cleanup but also the safety of the cleanup. And of course, we want to make sure we keep all of those volunteers safe. But to everyone who's already registered, thank you so much.
Is the government looking at any other business support packages, or is that part of the immediate hardship payments?
Yeah, so the next round of support payments that we will look to will be business payments. Each of these stages are well planned based on previous disasters, and when we're able to make assessments about what level of support is required and what geographic areas it's required in. So we have been working and will continue to work today to finalise a business support package.
Did you want to add
anything to that?
Do you have any other details on what that sort of looks like, and what would your message be to business owners who are needing that help?
Yeah, so as I say, we've been through this before, so we have a good template for what sort of assistance packages we can roll out that will best support businesses. Our message to businesses is we know where has been affected. We are in the process of assessing that, and we'll have, just as soon as possible, business support packages in place. Essentially, what we do first is make funds available to councils for immediate recovery, getting roads back up and running, that kind of thing. Then second, those hardship payments, those $1,000 payments to help people who are immediately affected, to get them through the first few days. And then we assess the impact on businesses and get a package out and available for them. And that's what people are working on right now.
30,000 people still don't have power, and some of the updates from Energex is not till the weekend. That's an incredibly long time to be without a fridge or lights or anything. Is there anything the government can be doing to fast track that work?
Our energy workers are doing absolutely everything they can to get the power on as quickly as they can. The difference between this event and what we might be more often used to in, say, a thunderstorm is in a thunderstorm they can very quickly get back out there, reconnect power. In this case, much of the power outage is where they have de-energised equipment because it has been inundated. And so in order to get it back up and functional, they have to wait for the waters to recede, then they have to dry it, get the mud out of it, and get it operational again. And so that's why for many people this will take days rather than hours. I know we're much more used to our energy workers being able to get the power back on within hours. Those who are without power for days are also eligible for those hardship payments, and so we can provide more detail about that as well.
A few questions for Steve, if possible. What's your immediate advice for people returning to their flood-affected homes from today? It can be quite overwhelming, not sure whether to start throwing out stuff or wait for an assessor to come. What's your immediate advice for that?
Well, first advice I've always given in this situation is to get that claim lodged. Now, obviously, there's some reasonable wait times in some of the telephone lodging activities, so we have got access. Everyone's got access to an opportunity to lodge that claim digitally. That means the claim gets lodged in the system. It means we can acknowledge the claim, that we can get it in the process quickly and get the assessors out. In terms of the immediate cleanup, I know people are really keen to get in and get those carpets out, and there's some council-sponsored cleanups, Mud Army and the like. Our plea to customers at the moment is just take photos, get evidence, get the full detail. So that's not because we're going to be in a debate about what was and wasn't covered. It's about just making sure that we can replace items very quickly. So acknowledge the frustration there. I acknowledge how psychologically difficult this is. We deal with this all the time. Unfortunately, we deal with it too regularly. We dealt with it in Townsville a couple of years ago, all through Queensland. So we understand the frustration, we understand the challenges people have. We know they want to participate in council cleanups and the like, and we're happy for them to do that, but it makes it a lot easier in advancing the claim if they can take photographs of all of the items that are in their property that they move out.
Steve, realistically, how long will it take for these people who are lodging these claims to get their insurance money?
Look, I think it's the way we manage these, and we're very skilled at them unfortunately over many years of experience. We'll categorise the claims. So obviously the smaller spoilage type claims, so people that have lost power, they've had items in their fridge that have gone off, etc. We can move them very quickly. We can give them a cash settlement. We move them through electronics, consumables. Again, we isolate that category of claim, and we pretty much cut a cheque to the customer to allow them to get on with it. And we've got great supply arrangements with all of those suppliers. It gets a bit more complex, obviously, the further the damage is, and we have to get assessors in there. We've got a very deep, very capable supply chain. We've got a panel of builders that we got already stood up to manage this event, and we'll bring some more capacity in from around Australia, and we'll look to do this as quickly as we can. Now, obviously, through COVID, supply chains have been challenged as well, whether that be new vehicles, used vehicles, hire cars, temporary accommodation. We've got to think of all of those things, and we're on the case doing that as we speak.
You said 13,000 claims. Do you have a figure on that of what this will cost you?
Well, I mean, obviously we have good reinsurance programs, so we're supported by our reinsurers. So the net cost of Suncorp is around $75 million. That's obviously just a very small amount of the total claims cost for a company like ours and for the industry, just to give you a point of comparison. And I make the point that we introduced automatic flood cover back in 2008 for this very reason. The last thing you need in these sorts of events is to have a debate with your insurer around where the water came from, whether it came from here or up through the ground or whatever. So automatic flood cover is right across the Suncorp insurance brand, and it's going to be very widespread, I think, across the industry here. So we'll get that underway. We spent $750 million as a total cost for 2011. That's shared between us and our reinsurers. It's hard to establish how much it's going to cost this time because the event is still unfolding and it's across a far wider geography.
Did a lot of those people opt out of flood cover because the premiums were very high and 2011 had an impact on whether people could afford insurance or not?
Well, certainly in the Suncorp brand, we don't allow people to opt out. If you buy Suncorp insurance, you get flood cover. And obviously we use our pricing engines and our mapping and all of our work to understand where you are at a higher risk, and obviously the premium reflects the risk that's embedded in where you live and the flood risk that's embedded in it. We haven't seen a huge opt-out in our other brands. I'm hopeful we'll only have a handful of cases where opt-out will be an issue, and I think given the nature of this event and the flash flooding element of it, I think the debates and discussions around whether people are or aren't covered, I think hopefully will be a very, very small number relative to 2011.
Just on the clean-up, in 2011, the Mud Army unfortunately caused a bit of trouble with insurance claims by ripping out fittings and fixtures and accidentally throwing things away. What kind of an impact can that have on the insurance claims? Do you have any advice there?
Well, again, I think the advice is to talk to us if that's a particular issue. I think all good intent is playing out in this environment, so I think we all have to take a very cautious approach to it and very considerate approach, and we will do that. But my message is just simply get a photograph. I mean, we've got a lot more access to cameras now than we've ever had. So if there's doubt, if there's confusion, if you're concerned about anything, just take a photo and then we can work constructively with the customers over the period of time that it takes to get those items replaced.
Still pretty early days, Steve, but do you predict that the damage bill will exceed 2011 because of how widespread this is?
Look, I think it's unfolding in Sydney at the moment. There's been a significant amount of rain over Sydney in the last 24 hours and potentially more to come. I'd make the point that, we're already dealing with 50,000 claims from the first part of summer. And so this is another big event on top of it. So, it is possible that it could be bigger in total dollar value, but it is over a larger geography. We've got to recognise that it stretches. I mean, we had events in Maryborough early in the season, through Gympie right down, all the way down to Sydney, and we really haven't yet got a good assessment of what is going on in northern New South Wales. We've deployed aircraft today, and what we send geospatial mapping and geospatial imaging. So we send aircraft up. We're doing that today to get a good sense of where that flood's been. and the damage that we might be dealing with as an industry, but also as Suncorp.
Steve, does the federal government need to step in and underwrite an insurance scheme for natural disasters?
No, I don't believe so. I think the key, and I've always said this, the key to making insurance more affordable is to really get this mitigation and resilience program up and running. And to their credit, the state government have been leading the way in this area. And, you know, we've got a 4-point plan that we talk about, which is improving the resilience of private infrastructure. So it seems ironic to me that you can get a subsidy for a solar panel on your roof, but you can't get a subsidy to batten your roof down to manage a Category 5 cyclone. Now, to their credit, again, the state government have recognised this. There's public infrastructure. You know, we saw it in Roma, we see it in Emerald. There's a range of flood mitigation initiatives that are sitting on the shelf ready to be approved by the state, federal and local authorities. We've got to improve planning laws. The reality of it is, over the last 50 years, we put people in the face of some of these disasters through inadequate planning laws. It's not a criticism of this government or any government in recent times. It's happened over almost 100 years. So we've got to address that. And then we've got to look at this complex issue of taxes and charges on insurance premiums, which I'm sure will be dealt with over the next couple of years.
Thanks.
Thank you.
How are you? Yeah, look,